What's up, peeps? I'm from Group 6 and I'm Gwyneth. I'm the Serna and I welcome you to Contracts Made Easy. So first off, we discussed in my last video we discussed about Articles 1398 to Articles 1402, which is about voidable contracts, and now we discuss unenforceable contracts, which is in my assigned articles are Article 1403 and Article 1404. So Article 1403 provides that the following contracts are unenforceable unless they are ratified. First, those who entered into in the name of another person by one who has been given no authority or legal representation or who has acted beyond his powers. 2. These that do not comply with the statute of frauds as set forth in this number. In the following cases, an agreement hereafter made shall be unenforceable by action, unless the same, or some note or memorandum thereof be in writing, and subscribed by the party charged or by his agent. Evidence thereof of the agreement cannot be received without the writing or a secondary evidence of its contents. So A, an agreement that by its terms is not to be performed within a year from the making thereof. B, a special promise to answer for the death, default, or miscarriage of another. C, an agreement made in consideration of marriage other than mutual promise to marry. D, an agreement for the sale of goods, chattels, or things in action at a price not less than 500 pesos, unless the buyer accept and receive part of such goods and chattels or the evidence or some of them of such things in action, or pay at the same time some part of the purchase money. But when the sale is made by auction and entry is made by the auctioneer in his sales book at the same time of the sale, of the amount and kind of property sold, terms of sale, price, names of the purchasers, and persons on whose account the sale is made, it is a sufficient memorandum. E. An agreement for the leasing for a longer period than 1 year or for the sale of real property or of an interest therein. F. A presentation as to the credit of a third person. And lastly, we have 3. Those where both parties are incapable of giving consent to a contract. So this article is rather lengthy, so we need to break it off. So first off, what are unenforceable contracts? So our unenforceable contracts are valid contracts but one that court will not enforce because of its defects unless it is ratified according to law. So there are 3 kinds of unenforceable contracts. So first we have unauthorized contracts. Unauthorized contracts are those entered in the name of another by one without or acting in excess of authority. Second kind of unenforceable contract is that those that do not comply with the statute of frauds. And third, those where both parties are incapable of giving consent to the contract. So since this article is lengthy, let us discuss it by paragraph. So first paragraph is that the following contracts are unenforceable unless they are ratified. Those entered into in the name of another person by one who has been given no authority or legal representation or who has acted beyond his powers. So these are unauthorized contracts. This kind of contract needs to be ratified by the principal person in order for it to have the legal effects. So an example of this situation is when you sell someone's property in their name without their authorization. So the contract here is unauthorized. This contract will only have its legal effects if the owner of the thing ratifies the selling. So we take note that unauthorized contract also includes situations in which a person was given authority but went beyond the authority that was given to him as what was stated. or who, as what was stated in the first paragraph in the last part, or who has acted beyond his power. So an example of this is when you were given the authority to mortgage the land, but you sold it instead. So now we will go to the second paragraph. It states that these that do not comply with the statute of frauds as set forth in the number. In the following cases, an agreement hereafter made shall be unenforceable by action, unless the same or some note or memorandum thereof be in writing and subscribed by the party charged or by his agent. Evidence thereof of the agreement cannot be received without the writing or a secondary evidence of its content. So this paragraph talks about the statute of fraud. So what is statute of fraud? Statute of fraud is a legal concept that requires certain types of contracts to be executed in writing. So although it requires agreements to be in writing, it does not need to be formal as what was stated, which is some note or memorandum thereof be in writing. So additional information. Statute of fraud is only applicable to executory contracts, meaning if the contract is fulfilled or partially fulfilled, then it is not applicable anymore. So what are the contracts that statute of fraud requires to be in writing? So A, an agreement that by its terms is not to be performed within a year from the making thereof. So for example, on January 1, 2021, Maria entered into an oral agreement with McKilling for the delivery of book on February 1, 2022, which McKilling has ordered. The contract here must be written in order for it to be enforceable in case Maria cannot in case Maria cannot do so. And B, we have a special promise to answer for the debt, default, or miscarriage of another. So Mama has a debt of 50,000 to Mother and her guarantor is Mommy, meaning Mommy will pay for the debt in case Mama cannot. But Mommy cannot be compelled to pay if it is not written. This contract should be written for it to be enforceable. And next, we have C, an agreement made in consideration of marriage, other than mutual promise to marry. So, Hilas promised to buy an island for Humble if Humble marries Hilas. Then Humble marries Hilas. So, for Humble to be able to compel Hilas to give the island, the agreement must be in writing. But the exception here is if both parties are in the same footing, then in the same footing. So in case if the other party cannot do the promise, so there will only be an action for damages because you can't really control someone who does not really want to marry. So that's an exception if both parties are mutually agreed that they should marry. So we take note here that the agreement does not relate to the marriage itself, but the promises between the parties. And we have D, states that an agreement for the sale of goods, chattels, or things in action at a price not less than 500 pesos unless the buyer accept and receive part of such goods and chattels or the evidence or some of them of such things in action or pay at the same time some part of the purchase money. But when the sale is made by auction and entry is made by the auctioneer in his sales book at the time of the sale of the amount and kind of property sold, terms of sale, price, names of the purchasers, and persons whose account the sale is made, it is a sufficient memorandum. So this paragraph may be lengthy, but it simply talks about the sale of goods, chattels, or things in action at the price not less than 500. So for example, Mura and Datu entered into an oral agreement where Mura will sell to Datu an accounting book worth 1,000 pesos. So this contract should be written for it to be enforceable in case Mura cannot deliver the book on the due date. And we have E. E states that an agreement for the leasing for a longer period than 1 year or for the sale of real property or of an interest therein. So it states here that when lease is longer than 1 year, the contract should be written. This means that leasing an immovable property for more than 1 year should be in writing for the contract to be enforceable. On the other hand, a lease of 1 year or less can be oral. Lease, meaning lease of immovable property for a year or less can be an oral agreement. But when the immovable property is on sale, it should always be in writing. And we have F, the last one of the classification under the paragraph 2. It states that a presentation as to the credit of a third person. So for example, I want to loan a money from you. Then you ask my brother if I have the credit to pay it. Then my brother assured you that I can pay it. So if ever I cannot pay on the due date, then you cannot compel me to pay because the assurance was in an oral form. It should be in writing for you to compel me. It should be in writing for it to be enforceable. And we have the last one in this kind of unenforceable contracts, which is those where both parties are incapable of giving consent to a contract. Actually, we have discussed when one party is incapable. So when only one party is incapable, the contract is voidable. But here in this article, it talks about where two parties are incapable. So if this is the case, it is an unenforceable contract. So we should learn to distinguish between the two. So if there's only one incapable party, that is a voidable contract. But if both parties, it is unenforceable. And lastly, we have Article 1404, where it states that unauthorized contracts are governed by Article 1317 and the Principles of Agency in Title 10 of this book. So it states what it states. So Article 1317 provides that no one may contract in the name of another without being authorized by the latter or unless by law or right to represent him. A contract entered into in the name of another by one who has no authority or legal representation or who has acted beyond his powers shall be unenforceable unless it is ratified expressly or impliedly by the person on whose behalf it has been executed before it is revoked by the other contracting party. So that is Article 1317. So Title 10 of this book, specifically funerals articles 305 to 310, states that the sale of property made by a person without the authority of the owner is null and void from the beginning, but afterwards become perfectly valid and is cured of the defects by ratification made by the owner under oath that he had consented the former on making the said sale. So again, in order to make unenforceable contracts enforceable, it should be ratified by the principal person. So that is all. Thank you for listening. This is my last video.